Most people don't realize that Homo sapiens, the species we belong to, are only one branch of a much larger human family tree. The genus Homo, which simply means man, has contained more than a dozen different human species over the course of history. Based on current evidence, the very first of these species appeared roughly 2.8 million years ago. That date is linked to the discovery of LD 350-1, a fragment of a lower jawbone thought to belong to an early ancestor of either Homo habilis or Homo. It remains the oldest known specimen tied to our genus. As new species emerged, a general pattern was noticeable. They tended to look and behave less primitive over time, while their tools and survival skills became more refined. Yet, in 2015, scientists in South Africa uncovered a species that turned this understanding upside down. Despite being one of the most recent human species in terms of age, its physical features were startlingly primitive, as though it had stepped out of the distant past. This species was named Homo naledi, often nicknamed the Starman, after the rising star cave system where all of its remains have been found. The cave itself is treacherous to navigate, and it took researchers years to properly explore. Inside, they uncovered a remarkable find, not a handful of bones, but the remains of more than 15 individuals, representing both males and females across different ages. Over 1,500 bone fragments were collected during the first major expedition, giving scientists an unusually clear picture of what these people looked like. Dating techniques suggest they lived between 335,000 and 236,000 years ago. Remarkably, during the same period our own species was beginning to appear. What makes them puzzling is that their anatomy doesn't align neatly with their age. Their skeletons show a strange blend of ancient and modern features. On average, they were very small, standing only about 1.43 meters (4 feet 9 inches) tall and weighing less than 40 kilograms, around 90 pounds. That made them far smaller than Homo sapiens of the same era, second in size only to the diminutive Homo floresiensis of Indonesia. But unlike the latter, whose small size can be explained by island dwarfism, Homo naledi lived on mainland Africa, making their stature harder to explain. Their hands added even more mystery. The thumbs and wrists were built much like those of modern humans and Neanderthals, suggesting skillful manipulation of objects, yet their fingers were long and curved, perfectly suited for climbing trees. In fact, they may have been even better climbers than much earlier species like Australopithecus, famous for specimens such as Lucy. Their rib cages, shoulders, and hips also echoed more ancient humans, reinforcing the idea that they spent a lot of time in trees, possibly as a way to stay safe from predators given their small size. And yet, their legs tell another story. Their bones show strong adaptations for upright walking. Developed thigh muscles, broad kneecaps, and long shins all point to the fact that they were fully bipedal and capable of traveling long distances, much like we do. This odd mix of tree climbing and ground walking adaptations has left researchers debating why such a combination existed. One possibility is that they were adapted to the patchy environment of southern Africa at the time, where open savannas were spreading, but forests still existed in scattered areas. They may have lived in one spot for a while, then moved long distances when resources ran out, alternating between the safety of trees and traveling on the ground. The rising star cave itself adds further intrigue. Although the remains are well preserved, no evidence of long-term living, such as tools or signs of fire, has been found inside. How these individuals ended up there is still an open question. Even their teeth posed puzzles. Though unusually small, they had thick enamel, the opposite of the evolutionary trend toward thinner enamel in later human species. Their molars also resembled those of much older hominins, giving them surprisingly durable teeth. Wear patterns suggest their diet was rough and gritty, likely involving underground foods such as raw tubers pulled straight from the soil. Despite this archaic dental design, the way their teeth developed was surprisingly modern, much like ours today. Put together, Homo naledi appears to be a contradiction, a relatively recent species with traits that seem ancient, yet capable of walking upright like us, climbing trees with ease, and surviving on a harsh, simple diet. Their brains only deepen the mystery, as they were far smaller than expected for humans living so late in history. On average, the brain size of Homo naledi was estimated at only 465 to 610 cubic centimeters. To put that in perspective, this is roughly half the capacity of a modern human brain and is comparable to the brain size of an infant in its first few months of life. Considering their already small body size, their brains were unusually tiny, which might suggest they weren't especially intelligent. Yet, the structure of their brains told a very different story. Instead of resembling the brains of earlier, more primitive hominins, their skulls displayed features closer to those of later humans such as Neanderthals and even ourselves. The shape showed well-developed temporal and occipital lobes, a less constricted skull behind the eye sockets, and a frontal lobe that looked surprisingly modern. These characteristics hint at the possibility of advanced abilities, including social behaviors, the capacity for language, and the use of tools. Still, there is no direct evidence to confirm this because no tools or artifacts have ever been linked to them, not even within the Rising Star Cave, where thousands of bones were uncovered. That absence is puzzling. How could a site preserve the remains of so many individuals yet not yield a single object of technology? Even so, some researchers suggest indirect evidence of their intelligence. During the Middle Stone Age, Homo naledi was the only known human species living in the Highveld region of South Africa, an area where tools from that era. Some anthropologists even argue that Homo naledi may have been far more advanced than their brain size suggests, pointing to the very location of the remains as a clue. The chamber where the bones were discovered is incredibly difficult to access. It requires navigating narrow passages, vertical shafts, and cramped spaces that only slim-bodied explorers can fit through today, often while contorted into specific positions. For Homo naledi to reach such a place suggests remarkable climbing ability and perhaps intentional effort. One leading theory proposes that these individuals were deliberately placed there by their own kind, possibly the earliest known example of humans burying their dead. If true, this would represent a sophisticated cultural behavior predating similar practices seen in other human species and would demonstrate that a smaller brain didn't necessarily mean a lack of intelligence. So, what exactly was Homo naledi? At present, scientists have several competing theories. One possibility is that they split off from the human lineage very early, perhaps as far back as the Pliocene, or at least 900,000 years ago. Another idea is that they emerged from interbreeding between early humans and Australopithecines, making them a hybrid population. A third hypothesis places them as a sister species to descendants of Homo heidelbergensis, while another suggests they were closer to Homo erectus, with whom they share some skull features. For now, though, their exact place in our family tree remains unresolved. What can be said with certainty is that life was extremely harsh for them. The wide range of ages and sexes represented among the bones shows that death struck frequently. Many individuals displayed signs of illness and developmental defects in their teeth, evidence of periods of malnutrition or stress likely caused by extreme seasonal shifts. Cold winters, in particular, would have been difficult for such small-bodied humans to endure. Even today, that part of South Africa has high rates of respiratory illness, flu, and childhood diseases due to environmental pressures, and it is thought conditions were even worse in the past. Predators were another danger. Given their size, they would have been vulnerable to big cats and scavengers such as lions, hyenas, and leopards. Interestingly, few large carnivore remains have been found near the Rising Star Cave, not because Homo naledi fought them off, but likely because the terrain was too rugged and game too scarce to attract major predators consistently. Ultimately, the unstable climate may have been what doomed them. While their remains are known only from Rising Star Cave, the site itself probably wasn't the cause of their extinction. Instead, it's believed that dramatic swings in weather and limited resources made survival increasingly difficult. Unable to adapt or relocate successfully, their population dwindled. Fossil evidence suggests they persisted for only about 100,000 years, a relatively short lifespan for a human species. Still, there may be discoveries yet to come. Future finds could reveal new details about how they lived, whether they truly practiced burial, and how intelligent they really were. For now, Homo naledi remains one of the most mysterious members of our extended family, small in body and brain, yet possibly far more remarkable than we have given them credit for.